Aloha. Welcome to Think Tech Hawaii's Movers, Shakers, and Reformers in Education. Interviews with people who have special insights into education from preschool all the way through higher education. We're streamed live every Wednesday. I'm Jim Sean, your host, and today we're interviewing one of the most interesting and thoughtful education leaders, former principal of Kapolei High School, Al Nagasako. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How did you get involved with education? I mean, you were a principal and other things. Did you start as a teacher?
Yes, sir. I started as a special education teacher. Loved every second of it. Learned a lot and continued as a resource teacher with the Honolulu District, trying to place some of my special ed youngsters into business opportunities.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you think maybe working with special ed gave you insights that were very helpful for being a principal of a regular school?
There's no question. As I created and developed my own personal philosophy on education, it really came down to addressing the needs of all kids. And my experience with special ed kids says one size does not fit all. And you need to accommodate these youngsters. But that stayed with me, and that helped me to develop and mature into, to create a philosophy that I thought could be carried on as you go forward.
Well, one of the things I remember visiting you in your office at Kapolei was your bookcase. You mentioned philosophy. I know you do a lot of reading. Can you talk a little bit about the ideas, the authors, the books, the...
You want the trashy stuff with it?
No, the good stuff.
Okay, okay. Actually, I'm a real strong believer in hands-on education, relevant education, making sure that youngsters have opportunities to learn and grow from where they come from and also where they are. So there are a couple of authors that I really enjoyed. When I started off at Nanakuli, I was fortunate enough to learn a little bit about Bill Spady, outcome-based education.
Now, when you say Nanakuli, do you mean as principal?
As a principal at Nanakuli High School. I was there for 6 years, and talk about the importance of teaching the whole child and getting kids ready for real life, and in a way, really addressing what I saw was the essence of education, which is the spirituality piece, by giving kids the confidence to succeed. But you only can do that if you try and have opportunities to succeed, and that's why it really did help. Bill Spady was one. Another is NASSP came out with a document early in the mid-90s called Breaking Ranks.
Yes, I remember that.
Right,
yes.
And Breaking Ranks made record from the Carnegie Foundation, and they were talking about how kids need to be active learners, you need to have relevant education, kids need to move around, especially boys, and it went against what most of what you saw in classrooms. So it was enthralled me and gave me an opportunity to learn a lot more about project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, which, again, using my special ed background, engaged kids who are different learners. They are non-traditional learners, and it became a more inclusive kind of curriculum. But it's also a belief that all kids need to be addressed, and you can't do it in one way.
There was a philosophy, I forgot the author, about the 7 intelligences.
Yes, Howard Gardner.
Howard Gardner.
Yeah,
yes.
now I heard he's got 8.
Yeah.
And it really talked about multiple intelligences and how we sometimes don't recognize that everybody comes with a gift. But we're not so good yet of taking advantage of those youngsters' gifts. First of all, identifying it, because we don't have a personalized environment.
Yes.
We don't have enough time in the day to get to know kids. So this was part of for me, the importance of personalizing education, and that's why we started going into teams and created some philosophical strengths and assets based on how kids learn and how kids learn at different rates.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always thought was transferable in some respect from special ed was this individual education plan, the IEP that is created for every special ed child, but not for anybody else.
It's funny that you say that. In 1975, I was one of the couple people who went to a national conference to learn about what IEPs were supposed to look like. That was
Right.
Public Law 94142 when it first came out. And it really began to formalize and structure, create a structure that really forces you to look at the strengths of kids and help you to create a curriculum, or at least designing your instructional strategies to address the different needs. Unfortunately, that really hasn't transferred to the larger population. Number one, I think because the numbers are so huge.
Yes.
Compared to special education classrooms versus your general classroom, where some of your high school teachers are teaching 150 kids. There's no way you can do that unless you look at creative ways of structuring your classroom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, when you consider the time-consuming element that a principal or others are involved with a special ed student's IEP development, there just isn't enough time in the day. But I wonder if you see, with the internet and computers and online and Skyping and things like that, a way to bring part of that to every student?
Well, first of all students need that.
Yes.
And we're talking about individualized portfolios.
Yes.
But also understanding that it's one thing to have a portfolio, but it's another to say, now what do I do when I recognize that these youngsters aren't doing as well? Mm-hmm. I got to get better at interventions. You know, we've gone into what we call response to intervention, RTI, but still, when we look at really providing that intensive support for each child to succeed, current structure doesn't allow for that. We really try like hell, but there's not enough time for one teacher to get to all of these kids and really get to know these kids well, because you've got to do that. Personalizing education is a foundation, I think, of any kind of successful teaching.
Yes, yes. This does get into, in some respect, the size of a school, the size of a class, and as you mentioned, the number of students any one teacher might have in a week.
Yeah, and we're looking at huge numbers,
Yes.
and we're looking at different ways of addressing that. Some of the schools went into smaller learning communities.
Yes.
Years ago, some of the middle schools went into middle school teams. Unfortunately, I don't think there's some consistency in that. Schools are trying, and they're trying really hard, but you need supports to make that happen.
Yes.
You really do need support. You need support in the way of, truthfully, more teachers. So you get less students in one class, but it's also, what do you do in the classroom when you do team? You know, you really, if you follow breaking ranks, or at least understand a little bit about breaking ranks, it really does talk about active learning and relevant learning. Similar
Yes.
to what Bill Daggett and the International Center for Learning and Education, they pound that in you, that the kids need to have relevant education, but not all of us know how to do that as well as we should.
So we really have a structure that is not geared at all to the philosophy that you've been involved with.
Yeah,
right?
well, I don't know if it, it's quite traditional still, and to get into the kind of programs that I talked about with active learning, relevant instruction, personalized instruction, it really is a paradigm shift. And although we've been talking about it for the last 20 years, I don't think as a system, we've completely understood all the elements of relevant instruction and what good teaching looks like. We try like hell, there's no question. But if you're gonna adjust the whole child, it's gotta look very different from what it does now.
Now, you did mention briefly the kind of instability, turnover that is going on in our schools. An average superintendent, 3.2 years max, teacher turnovers, half of the teachers are gone in 5 years, administrators, many people of our generation who went into teaching, the boomers, are aging out. Is this a problem or an opportunity that the old thinkers are?
I like how you said that, Jim. Is it a problem? Yes, first of all, it is a problem. There's no question. When some of the hard-to-staff schools still have tremendous turnovers, it's not good for kids, not at all, because, you finally get close to a kid after 2-3 years, and then you're gone.
Yes.
Is it an opportunity? Sure it is. It sure is an opportunity to relook at the system and first of all, target the hard-to-reach schools. I mean, the hard-to-staff schools. Mm-hmm. What do? Do we just pay them more? Or my belief is that if teachers have success in their classroom, where they can really see kids learn and grow, they'll stay. But that only happens when, number one, you feel supported by the principal, you have adequate facilities, and you've got enough resources. Mm-hmm. But all three need to come together. And for some of the schools that are on the outlying areas, as we get to West Oahu, we get to some of our Big Island schools, even Molokai and Lanai. Mm-hmm. It takes a hell of a lot more resources to keep your teachers there.
Yes.
And until we address that, it's going to be catch as catch can. And right now, most of our mainland teachers that we recruit, I was part of the state recruiting team last 2 years, at the most 3.
Yes.
And it's not good for kids. But how do you address that? That's really, we started talking about policy. We started talking about support from both at the legislative level, but it's also advocating. We need people, especially people from the community, advocating for what's right for kids. Mm-hmm. And that's going to take some leadership at the school level. It's going to take some leadership at the district level and at the state level. But it also means we got to bring people together to have that discussion. And if we're going to make a commitment, what would that look like? So there's not one answer, there's many answers to it, but we've got to get people to the table to have that discussion. If not, nothing changes.
Yes. Well, I'm talking with Al Nagasako, former principal of Kapolei High School, who helped create Kapolei High School. We're going to get into that in a minute, but we're going to take a short break first. Be right back.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at Think Tech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I host Likeable Science on Think Tech Hawaii, and I do this because I care about science literacy in Hawaii. I want to spread the understanding that science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life. I want to make sure the broadest possible spectrum of people understand the beauty and the value of science and realize that science plays out each and every day of their lives. I want you to understand that science is fun. So we bring onto this show each week guests who are scientists, from astronomers to zoologists, and we talk about what they do and how they do it. But most importantly, we talk about why you should care about their work, why you should see that their work has value and impact on your life. So I hope you'll join us Fridays, 1 p.m. here on Think Tech Hawaii. You can watch us via live stream. You can watch us recorded on Olelo, and you can see us each week. We hope you'll join us.
Welcome back to Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. I'm Jim Sean, your host. We're talking with Al Nagasako, who has a long history in education, philosophically, special ed, principal. But what I really want to ask about is you were involved with a very unique opportunity to create a new school in a new community, Kapolei. Tell us how you got that opportunity and what you did with it.
Okay, first of all, just let me share with you that I was part of a team. This was a design, build, construction project that was the first ever. And the DOE was smart enough to hire people to help create this charrette process. And that time was led by Kathy Kawaguchi. Mm-hmm. And brought people from all walks of life. In fact, we had teachers, principals, we had custodians, as well as students and parents creating and designing a school that would supposedly meet the needs for the 21st century. And much of it came from, the basis for the design came from breaking ranks. You know, what an American high school should look like. And a lot of the elements of the design were built into it. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the team. And I just contributed my piece, and as this started to come to fruition, it really did validate some of my personal beliefs on what teaching and learning should look like.
So the first thing is design the facility, right? So what are the kind of questions or issues or criteria your team developed?
Well, first of all, they needed to come up with a strong vision, which they did. And, you know, I can still remember what the vision was at that time, but we really wanted to create a school that was in the heart of the community. Now, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
That means, in my opinion, it meant at that time the school having classrooms outside of school, in fact, using businesses to help teach our kids or provide learning environments for our kids, but it also meant that parents and schools were now, community were now involved in seeing that we are indeed following through with what we said the design was meant to achieve.
So we got a gazillion schools and they all look like strip malls. You didn't build a strip mall.
Yeah, it was interesting. We had classrooms that were wide open. In fact, you could hold three classrooms in one, wide open, but we also had opportunities to create smaller learning environments. Also, we also had teacher workrooms where it was all glass, where kids could look in and teachers could look out, but primarily the intent was for kids to look into the teacher workroom and see that teachers are indeed working together in small groups, exactly what we're trying to do with our instruction. So it's, you know, watching the same thing, and it works, because teachers being in one workroom also provides opportunities for teachers to dialogue and learn different instructional strategies from each other. So that it was done really very well. If I look at what helped teachers the most was creating those centers where teachers could really interact with each other and learn. So now your rookie that comes in from the mainland can be welcomed by a group of 15, 20 teachers who are in that office all day.
So a traditional teacher, this is my classroom. This is my desk. You know, I'm separate from the others. It's my little turf, right? Was that difficult getting teachers to conceptualize that they didn't have their own private little turf?
I think that was one of the biggest things. But after a while, teachers loved it, because now you had an opportunity to work together in a team to do multidisciplinary kinds of projects where English, social studies, and science would come up with a project that embedded real-life opportunities for these youngsters to experience. But what they found was that when you do have this kind of environment, it provides kids an opportunity to meet more individually with teachers, because I have 3 classrooms. At any given time, I could have 2 teachers teaching 3 classes, which allows this one teacher to spend time with kids. But it depended on what the team wanted to do to meet the needs of the kids. And I really felt that part of the teaming and the design was to help personalize education for children. And these are one of the ways that we could do it.
You know, this sounds like a private school to me. In public education, students are tested individually, not in groups. Teachers are given licenses individually in one subject. How does this 21st century community-driven vision interplay with a system that kind of believes in atomized lives.
I like your atomized lives, but I think more and more schools are beginning to understand the importance of multidisciplinary kinds of teaching. In other words, can your English teacher teach social studies? Sure, because the content is what you can gain with when you talk with the social studies teacher. But your English teacher's strength is going to be in the writing, the expository writing, and understanding how to set up a paper. So there's multiple ways of doing that. And your social studies teacher can teach English if they can learn the appropriate grammar and pedagogy that's involved. So yes, I think it's time to look more holistically. That doesn't take away from the need to know content. You need to know content, there's no question. But it's also, to me, the process of learning that's more important. That's how you engage kids in meaningful learning.
You know, recently, I think it was on the Big Island, there was a controversy of the principal wanted some teachers to teach outside of their license areas, which you're actually suggesting. Well, this triggered grievances and all kinds of pilikia. How does that vision of collaboration, English teachers teaching non-English things, how does that work in a
So what I wanted to share, what I have an opportunity to share right now, Copley was designed that way. Copley was designed to do interdisciplinary teaching. I'm not forcing teams to do that. It's up to them if they want to
all volunteer.
do that.
Yes.
And, you know, there's never a top-down, but the school was designed that way, and then we can continue to advocate for the importance of interdisciplinary teaching, project-based learning, and it comes from that mindset that we begin to do those things. It's not me saying, you will teach that and you will teach that. That will not work.
So you're almost suggesting that the facility drives the culture.
Well, first of all, it's your philosophy on teaching and learning that drives it. That should then reflect what the design of the building should look like. But it starts with some strong beliefs on teaching and learning. But you need to do that. But it's not just your beliefs. It's truly that collaborative process is you need to get some agreement on what is our school based on. What do we believe are the best ways to teach children? What do we believe are the ways that children learn best? Then if we do, we begin to prioritize, and at that point we can come to some agreement and consensus on this is how we proceed. If we do believe that children learn best by active learning, what does that look like? How do we spend time to talk about it, to create these opportunities for kids to really get into something that they enjoy doing, and in the meantime, they're learning so much. But it doesn't just happen. It happens because there's collaboration.
Yes, and you know, every DOE school has a school community council made up of stakeholders, administrators, teachers, parents, whatever. But they're explicitly told you have no role in governance, right? Do you see that in a traditional DOE school, maybe the SCCs, the school community councils, might play a more fundamental role in this dialogue?
Okay, let me share with you again. My personal belief is that the school community council, if used wisely, can provide the school with more resources than you currently have. Yeah, but they've got to get behind and understand and be part of that process to first of all understand that this is what our school is about. This is what we believe. Once they do that, you've got a group that will advocate for your school, advocate with businesses. An example was when I was a principal in Nanakuli. We actually had a retreat where I had up to 90 people at Turtle Bay. And it was sponsored by Chevron. And the goal for that meeting was for our entire school community to agree to 3 priorities for the school. And we spent 3 days to come to that. So at the end, there's no question, this is what our school is going to be doing going forward for year 1, year 2, year 3. And that process really made a big difference. And it came up because not only did I believe in the importance of engaging your school community, there were many school leaders who believed in the importance of it. And it was, I thought, so refreshing that parents, church, we had church leaders, we had business people really having a say and selecting out of all the choices our 3 priorities for the school. And what it did was it really pulled the community together. It pulled the staff and the community together to create that environment that I thought was just wonderful place to be.
Without suggesting that a DOE school like that should become a charter, charters do have charters, which lay out philosophy, goals. Do you think that some kind of more official document that a school and a community creates might be helpful in that?
Yeah, but again, Jim, I like that fact that kind of keeps everybody in line because they've signed their name to it.
Yes, yes.
I think there's a place for that, but also you don't want another piece of paper that is seen as a compliance-driven activity.
Yes, yes.
And I think many of our schools are pretty tired of that kind of compliance, perception of a compliance-driven directive.
Yes.
Now, I like that idea of the charter where people actually sign their names, said, I commit to X, I commit to Z. And this is how we as a school do that. And it's still very doable. But again, when you look at schools being like charter schools, many schools function with that flexibility. It depends on the culture and the leadership at the school that creates an environment that allows for that to happen every day.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So you can do it without any formal charter structure, but you need strong leadership. You need a good, cohesive team at your school.
And it sounds like you created a lot of partnerships between the school and businesses and others that could contribute to a broader sense of education in Kapolei.
Yeah, and that was part of the vision. Kapolei is an exciting and dynamic student-centered learning environment in the heart of the community. So it's incumbent upon me to get out there and share what the school is about. And as we did that, we've got all the support. I mean, for example, we had the Kapolei Rotary Club used to meet at our school every Thursday. And we'd feed them breakfast. But then they'd serve as resources for my business academy and others. So, you know, it does work.
We're talking with Al Nagasako on education reformers, movers, and shakers. I'm Jim Sean. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week, we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to Think Tech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We're talking with Al Nagasako, who is very much part of a team that created a facility, a school, a vision in Kapolei for a different kind of holistic learning. I did want to talk to you a little bit about, though, most schools are there, the structure is set, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to start from scratch. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we need to take a second look at to give that school community breathing room to do what needs to be done for that whole child, whether it be policies of the Board of Ed or collective bargaining or licensing?
Okay, well, let me again share that when I was at Nanakuli, you know, we could do. We didn't have that new school like we did at
Right,
Kapolei.
right.
But conceptually, what we did was we believed in teams. And there's ways that you can pull teams together, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're in your traditional classroom. If you need to go to the cafeteria and do a team activity, go to the cafeteria. But it's again based on active learning. What's really, if we really want to see some changes, yeah, what I really believe is that there's so many kids in our system right now, and this is dire, that aren't being taken care of. By that I mean, it's not just about test scores, and it's not about Common Core standards and having all kids reach that. Some kids won't reach that, but it's nice to have those goals. But what do we do with those kids who are struggling learners, kids that are 2-3 years behind? I don't know if I know we don't do enough, and it's not because we don't want to. I don't think there's an opportunity because classes are large. We need to learn how to, first of all, provide intervention strategies for these kids. We talk about differentiation and all that new learning, but realistically, what do we do for kids that are different and are struggling? And I put my neck out and said, we're talking about over 30% of the kids that are not being addressed. What needs to happen with that 30% of the kids? We need to do things differently. We can't keep doing the same old and hope that these 38% of the kids will get better. We got to really put our heads together and determine what are some ways that we can really engage these disengaged kids. That's the only way we're going to get them back. If not, we'll never capture our communities. We've got to recapture the communities and bring this sense of hope back. We don't have that for many of our youngsters, whether it's your special needs kids, your English language learners. Right now, some of the Micronesian populations, we've got the Filipino immigrants, Chinese. Many of these youngsters are not engaged. And if we want to build our community and build a strong community based on wellness, we've got to talk about the gap in student achievement. Because, you hear a lot about the economic achievement. You talk about the gap in salaries. The only way you're going to address that is you got to close that academic achievement gap. And we don't put enough, I don't think. We don't know how to work as well as we should with these 30% of the youngsters that are totally disengaged. And these are your dropouts and kids that leave the system with, sometimes I believe, with no hope that they can live a fulfilled life. But it's a strong statement, but I truly believe the system's got to pay attention to these forgotten kids, or kids that are struggling and are not making it.
So at any school, even if they're collaborative, a principal is a really key person, right? And whether or not they have had the opportunity to talk with people like you and to talk about the whole child and to collaborate with other principals, seems to me that there's a major role for leadership development and mentoring that might not be where it should be now.
Well, we never have enough resources, first of all, you know that, Jim. And I think everyone's trying, whether it's the Department of Education, the district offices, the legislature, everyone's trying. But we gotta determine, first of all, as a school community, broader school community, what is important? What are our priorities? If we're going to create a healthy community, what does that look like? It's one thing to say we want a healthy community. What does that look like? What does that look like for job development? What does that look like for opportunities for youngsters to get into post-secondary or technical training? What does it look like? That's when you get people signing charters that if these youngsters meet a certain level, they will anticipate they will accept these youngsters and then provide these supports. How do we get more resources to the schools where teachers now have more time to get to know their kids, use a more culturally relevant curriculum as well as hands-on, getting kids prepared for life after school? Maybe the focus has been so much on testing.
Yes.
And teacher evaluation, and not as much on what's good for kids and how do we help teachers do what's good for kids.
You know, my background is in history, and if I look at the history of public ed, and you kind of back up and you say, why do we have public schools? Well, we want to create good citizens. We want civic literacy. I mean, to know how our country works, our state works, our democracy works. I mean, citizenship has always been one of those sort of visceral bases of wanting to have this financial literacy, wanting to ensure that students know how to just get a job and balance a checkbook and understand how to start a family and feed them and all those sort of things. It sounds very, very basic, but it seems to me that whether you're talking about more sophisticated STEM, science, technology projects, whether you're talking about service learning, you're talking about, these things tend to exist outside of the regular school day. The things that probably most citizens would agree we want our schools to develop, you know, as the whole art, physical education. These are, you know, add-ons, afterthoughts right now. Do you have any thoughts on how these more sort of fundamental things got shoved out?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned early on, because if I recall, in the early 1900s, it could have been 1904, John Dewey, father of public education, said the best way to get a kid into college is voc ed. It's too hands-on. Get the kid interested in doing stuff, that kid will go. I think we forgot that. I think, remember when home economics was a requirement?
Yeah, or shop.
Or shop? What happened? And when you listen to some of the futuristic speakers, Tony Wagner, for example,
Yes.
the survival skills. Now Young Zhao talks about how do we prepare kids for a life of being an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur doesn't just mean money.
That's right.
How do we prepare kids for that? Is because the only way you can do that is you got to expose kids to a number
have
of
to do it.
different activities.
Yes.
They've got to do it to say, yeah, I don't like art, but man, I like shop and I like building stuff. But you got to expose them. But we don't do that. We've narrowed the curriculum, and unfortunately, so much emphasis has gone to math and English. Nothing wrong with that, but I think you're taking away just half of a body of a kid, because most of us went. Well, I did go to school because I liked PE. I hated shop because I couldn't cut anything straight.
Could never measure that the same way.
But you have the opportunity to try stuff and determine whether or not this is an area of interest. But we've gone away from that. And when we talk about the whole child, you're exactly right, Jim. These youngsters need to be exposed to much more than just the traditional academics. Or, put it another way, how do we embed these activities into traditional education? English, math, science, social studies. How do we give kids an opportunity to dance, to draw, to paint in these traditional, again, we're talking about project-based learning, we're talking about inquiry-based learning. So it's not either or. There's ways that I think we can skin the cat. We just need to commit to say all youngsters need these opportunities. But again, it takes a whole community to get behind that and advocate for what's right. We can't let the feds tell us what's right for us. We know what's right for us. We also know that we're uniquely Hawaiian. And there's some Hawaiian values and culture that needs to be embedded that makes us so different from everyone else. And we need to value that, because that is where we come from. It doesn't matter your color of your skin. There's certain values we share in the state of Hawaii that is unique. And we got to get back to that. But again, we gotta address the whole child, not just the cognitive, not just for the brainiacs, you know. We gotta make sure we address all kids, and right now we're not doing as good a job as we should.
It does seem that those partnerships, if translated into, well, let's just take athletics, soccer and volleyball, the huge, huge leagues that operate outside of the school, that engage literally hundreds of thousands of students, young people, in physical activity. And even the robotics and the STEM activities, you know, maybe you have a teacher who loves it, but that's going to be after school. And it does seem to me that focusing only on the 7 hours of classroom instruction, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money. Do you see perhaps creating that concentric circle of partnerships where
Support.
every student has to be somehow engaged in something, exploring, you know, outside of the traditional 7-hour day, march them through?
Because what you just talked about, Jim, is exactly what the senior project was meant to do.
Yeah.
And nothing precludes a school from having a junior project and a sophomore project and a 9th grade project.
And I know one of the innovative things you did, real world, was in Kapolei, your students did the report for the Department of Education. And it always struck me as, now that's what students should be doing. You know, real world adult projects. And I think you're a real, you know, champion of demonstrating how that works. And I'm really hopeful that down the road a dialogue can develop where others will do the same thing. We've been talking with Al Nagasako. He's former principal of Kapolei High School. He's worked with the union. He's worked with every aspect of public education and has some wonderful holistic ideas of how not to leave every child behind. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim Sean. This is Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers.